Alright, so welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we are talking about Sebastien Meunier leaving the house of Ann Demeulemeester. But before I continue, you can follow me on Instagram at Fashion Roadman. On my Instagram page I post a lot of fashion news and just a few snippets into the fashion industry, so definitely check my Instagram out. And for those who are not aware of Ann Demeulemeester or not aware of kind of the house, if you want some brief introduction to it, I have actually made a short kind of easy to follow video about Ann Demeulemeester, and I've also made a video about the Antwerp 6, which also ties into Ann Demeulemeester and the story of Ann D. But to summarize who Ann Demeulemeester is, or I'll start calling her Ann D because her surname is very difficult to pronounce. She is an influential fashion designer from Belgium. She studied fashion design at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp, and she's of course part of the famous Antwerp 6. She started her namesake label in 1985, and for some context of how influential she is, designers like Rick Owens have literally said that he wouldn't exist without people like Ann Demeulemeester coming before him. So that just gives you an idea of how highly she's respected by her peers. And in 2013, she left her house, and she left it in the hands of a man named Sebastien Meunier, who then took over as the creative director. So of course that brings us to the big news that was announced a few days ago, that Sebastien Meunier is actually stepping down and leaving the brand after being the creative director at Ann Demeulemeester for 7 years, and he's been at the house for 10 years, which is crazy. And I'm gonna get into why I think this is a really bad move for the house in general. So for some background on Sebastien Meunier himself, Sebastien is a French fashion designer, and he worked under Margiela for 10 years. So he worked for Margiela when Martin Margiela was actually there, so the proper Margiela era. He worked at Margiela for 10 years before Ann Demeulemeester and her husband were looking for someone who could take over the menswear design at her house. So they called him, gave him an interview, and then eventually gave him a job. So he was head of menswear for 3 years, from 2010 to 2013. And then after Ann Demeulemeester left the house in 2013, he was promoted to creative director, which he held from 2013 to 2020. Where now he's just stepping down from the role. From the way everything was handled, it seems like everything was premeditated. It seems that Ann D knew that she was going to leave the house in 2013. So in 2010, she was trying to bring someone in who would design the menswear and kind of groom him to understand the way she designs, her aesthetic, and then kind of when she leaves, promote him to creative director. And I think he was such a good fit for Ann Demeulemeester at the time because he has worked with so many Belgian designers, and of course he worked at the house of Martin Margiela under Margiela. So he understands the Belgian design, he understands just Belgian culture from working under Margiela. And then of course he was a deconstructivist, because most of what Margiela does was deconstructing and reconstructing garments. Of course that's not all Margiela did, like people make it out to seem, but that was definitely a big aspect, and he did bring that aesthetic over to Ann Demeulemeester because Ann D is also a deconstructivist. I think because Sebastien Meunier was actually tutored by Ann D and kind of groomed by Ann D, the way he designs is very genuine to the house, which is rare. The way he designs is very different to Ann D, but at the same time it's still true to the house codes. And I kind of love that he's able to follow his own design aesthetic and his own specific design language while still making it true to the house through different elements that he uses. And in my opinion, that's why I've been such a big fan of Sebastien Meunier. And ever since I can remember, Ann D was my favorite brand, and I'm very open about it, because many creative directors that work at big houses, they do the easiest thing possible, where you just reference something from an old collection in the house and then you just reproduce it, and that takes no work. I like that Sebastien Meunier is really intellectual with the way he references pieces, but also mix it into his design aesthetic. And I think that's what the role of a creative director is to bring your flair and kind of mix and match that with the house codes and the ethos of a brand. But when looking at differences between Ann D when she was designing for her house and then when Sebastien Meunier took over, Ann D's aesthetic is more dark, there's more blacks, there's less color, it's more grunge. And even if you look at kind of Ann D's first inspirations of her designs from people like Patti Smith, it's from this very rock, grunge, hard culture. So I'd say Ann D's clothing, when she was designing the house herself, so this is 2013 and before then, it was very, very edgy, it was raw. And I think Sebastien Meunier, his take on the house is very romantic, it's mellow, it's soft, it's emotional. And even if you think of like his references, because Ann D herself, she used to reference Edwardian times, or she used to reference things like music from different cultures like grunge and rock music, where Sebastien Meunier, he's more mellow, and he gets references from different dance cultures and ballet, like Afternoon of the Faun and things like that. And then even if you look at, of course I said Sebastien Meunier, he uses more color and crazy colors that Ann D would never use, like super bright purples and reds and greens and yellows. And on top of that, what I really love about Sebastien Meunier is his fabric choices, and that's what adds to it being romantic and mellow and soft. The way he uses a lot of silk material or linen, and it kind of adds to the aesthetic. But at the same time, there are many similarities as well, which is why I said he can fuse his own design aesthetic and make it true to the house of Ann D. So one similarity is that they both have this concept of male fragility. In many interviews when she was designing for the house, she talked about this idea that she was designing for a man that can show his emotions, a man that isn't afraid to do things that are seen as female. And kind of she was also on the wave of designing clothing that can be worn by men and women. And Sebastien Meunier continues this idea, and he's even said that because he likes male fragility and just the idea that a man can actually be emotional and fragile, and both of them kind of share the same idea, they just interpret this in different ways, which is why the aesthetic looks extremely different. I think another kind of similarity but difference at the same time is there's a collection, one of Ann Demeulemeester's first collections was actually inspired by Edwardian men. And what she did was she flipped it on its head, where basically Edwardian men were the people that had all the power, and those were the people that had the final say. And she flipped this idea on its head and reimagined what would it be like if in Edwardian times it was women who ruled everything, not men. So she took design elements from Edwardian times and then tried to make it look more feminine. And it was crazy. That was her first basically runway collection. And this idea, Sebastien Meunier kind of uses it, and that's why in a lot of Sebastien Meunier's garments, they are very inspired by Edwardian times, and you see things like these Edwardian button-ups and just the aesthetic of it in general. So you can see where Sebastien Meunier is still referencing Ann Demeulemeester, or there's even a collection that Ann Demeulemeester made about just living in Antwerp and the Antwerp docks, and that's why in this Ann Demeulemeester collection you see the model wearing feathers and wearing ropes. And then in the Sebastien Meunier's Ann Demeulemeester Spring Summer 20 collection, he kind of took this reference, and what he did was, because he's French, he's not Belgian, he made his collection inspired by his experience around just the Belgian Antwerp docks and kind of just the serenity around it. But it was from the lens of a French person, the lens of an outsider, and their viewpoint on just what it's like to live around the docks and just live around the sea. And that's why in this collection you see a lot of rope bags or sailor hats, baker boy hats, things like that. So as you can see, so many similarities at the same time, so many differences. And now I say all of this to say, I just cannot genuinely imagine anyone else designing at the house of Ann Demeulemeester, because he just understands the aesthetic of Ann D perfectly, to the point where he can fuse it with his own ideas and it'll still be genuine and it'll still be true to the house. And I don't think any other designer, especially because Sebastien Meunier is the only designer who was personally groomed by Ann D for the creative director role, and there's no one else who I think will genuinely bring across her ideas and be able to fuse it with their own design aesthetic in a way that it will be genuine. The only person who kind of has a similar aesthetic to Ann D is Isabel Beninato, who I've made a video on. But even Isabel Beninato, Ann D is a really big house, and you have to have a big range when you're creative director of Ann D, because Ann D is known for footwear. Like, footwear and accessories at Ann D are impeccable. And if you're not a good footwear designer and you can't come up with really innovative footwear designs, first of all, you're going to struggle on that front, because that's what sells the most. And Ann D sells such a wide range of different types of garments. And I haven't seen Isabel Beninato design such a wide range of clothing. So it could be a challenge for her, but at the same time, I don't think she's ready for a role like that. And other people are saying Haider Ackermann, but I don't see Haider Ackermann being a good fit at Ann D. I just don't personally see that. And I think Sebastien Meunier could have stepped down for many different reasons, because obviously he hasn't come out and given an interview and explained why exactly he stepped down. But it was very, very well known that Ann Demeulemeester, the house, was struggling financially. So that could be one of the reasons. Maybe they kind of just parted ways because of the financial aspect of things. There are also rumors that New Guards Group, and New Guards Group is basically a company that owns many different brands and smaller companies. So they own brands like Off-White, Heron Preston, Palm Angels. They are looking into acquiring the house of Ann Demeulemeester, which makes a lot of sense because they're in financial struggles. So when brands are normally struggling financially, they look for investors. Otherwise, the brand will just have to fold. The only issue I have with that is just listen to the brands that New Guards Group owns. Palm Angels, Heron Preston. So if they take over Ann D, they're just gonna destroy it, in my opinion. And so this whole saga and the whole situation to me is really upsetting, because like I said, Ann D has been my favorite brand ever since I started learning about the Antwerp 6 and their impact in fashion. And I just like the story of Ann D. It's kind of like an underdog story, someone who doesn't get the respect she deserves. And her peers respect her, but people in the wider public don't give her the same respect as the likes of Dries van Noten or Walter van Barendonk or the likes of Martin Margiela. But either way, yeah, it's really, really sad to see Sebastien Meunier leave the house of Ann D. This is just not something I was prepared for, and it wasn't something I ever was expecting. So yeah, for me, the whole news is just crazy. Like I said, Ann D is my favorite brand, and I'm such an Ann D fanboy that I actually run an Instagram page called Ann Demeulemeester Talk. And I run it with two people, two of my friends who are also Ann Demeulemeester fanatics. One of them is Jason and one of them is Josh. So I asked them to share their thoughts on just this whole situation. And Josh couldn't share his thoughts because he was like in the middle of stuff and he's quite busy. But Jason was able to send me a clip. So what I'm gonna do is basically play the clip.
Hey guys, it's Jason from Pre The Drop here. So I work with AO and Damio on the Anti-Fashion podcast, and I also help him to admin the Ann Demeulemeester Talk page on Instagram. So, following the recent news regarding Meunier stepping down from his position as the creative director a couple of days ago, really I felt quite devastated, considering I heard the news surrounding the reasons behind why him and a significant portion of the design team were actually forced to cut ties with the fashion house. Now, if you don't actually know, I finished my final year of university recently, and actually my final project was an article discussing and comparing Sebastien Meunier's latest collection, or well, the Spring-Summer 20 collection, with Ann Demeulemeester's own Spring-Summer 1992 show. And during this article, I actually draw comparisons of essentially how like the eponymous labels divided into two chapters. So, which this in itself kind of represents the dichotomy / duality that both designers love doing, that transparency, opacity, light, dark, heavy, flowy, etc. you know? And Anne, for me, represents this, like, almost this poetic, this poet who's fond of employing these moody Belgian blacks, whilst Meunier is this sensual French dandy. And in the 10 years that he worked upon collections for the brand, essentially Sebastien has successfully sort of managed to put his own little twist on the house DNA. Like, you wouldn't see Anne using a lot of these pastel colours that Meunier adores using, all of these vibrant colours. And for me, it's a twist on the house DNA in a way that's still recognisably Anne, which it's rare for a designer to be able to pay homage in a way that's true to themselves. And in fact, it's sort of this which makes the news so bittersweet for me, because most people prefer Anne era Anne from the brand, but for me, Meunier's work actually speaks to me on like a deeper, it speaks to me on a deeper level. It speaks to me on a level that speaks to the fragility of men, the innate femininity that's held within blokes, or within some blokes at least. And I can't believe that his story's been drawn to a close so soon after the ending line was, I'm looking forward to the future of this house. I'm looking forward to seeing how he continues his story. And the acquisition of the house by the New Guards Group, by Antonioli, it's something that leaves such a bittersweet taste in my mouth, because I'm terrified that my favourite brand is going to become like another. So, for example, Helmut Lang left the house, didn't have a person to replace him, and essentially the house, what they do now is they just let out re-editions, overpriced re-editions of his previous hits. So it's like going back in time, looking at the top 20 hits. You know, it's not great. But even worse than that, having overpriced re-editions, I'm terrified of it actually taking more the turn of what McQueen's brand took, or what Bickenberg's took. If you look at old Dirk Bickenberg stuff, and you look at the site today, they look nothing alike. The vision's been completely bastardized from the original designer's design language, and it's not something that I want to happen with a brand that I love, man. And it's like, if this is going to be the case, I can't actually think of a more stupid choice of a house to take over, because really, when you think about it, the consumer base of Ann Demeulemeester only exists literally due to the cult following that both Anne herself and Meunier have acquired over the years amongst the fashion community. There's a very strict set of people that enjoy and wear Anne's work, and basically I fear that if they take this direction, then it's going to be the downfall of a fashion brand that I love. And considering Hydra actually is also owned by Anne Chappelle, who was the former CEO of Ann Demeulemeester, there's rumours of Hydra's fashion brand also facing bankruptcy. It begs the question, will they also be taken over? Because if so, it's like, bro, these are two of the brands that I love the most in fashion. Fuck, man. Yeah, it's like, it's a tale of two chapters. Chapter 1, the story was written by Anne herself. Meunier has penned down chapter 2, and it's only time will tell what chapter 3 will actually bring about for the house. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's ugly, no one actually knows at this stage. But I will say that I'm skeptical for the future. This is just a little disclaimer at the end, though. I know at the current point it's just speculation as to whether it's actually the New Guards Group that's acquired the brand, but the points that I've made during this are essentially relevant to and apply to any buyer of the brand. I don't believe the decision to make Meunier and a significant portion of the design team redundant is a smart business decision. As I mentioned, it's a brand with such a cult following, and I don't see it succeeding without people who understand the DNA of the house. Anyway, yeah, that's me. Good luck with the video, mate. Take care. Bye.
So yeah, thank you very much for Jason for sharing his thoughts. Jason also has a YouTube channel, which you can check out. But yeah, on that note, comment down your thoughts below on just where you think the house of Ann Demeulemeester is going. There are a lot of rumors that Ann Demeulemeester herself is going to go back to the brand, which isn't true because a representative of New Guards Group has denied any sort of that thing happening. But yeah, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Definitely subscribe because I make fashion content and I try to talk about different aspects of fashion. Sometimes I talk about fashion news, sometimes I talk about fashion history, and I just try to switch it up and kind of have a broader view on the fashion industry. But also, if you want to support the channel financially, I'll really appreciate it if you subscribe to the Patreon. It starts at $3, and at $3 you can get access to exclusive content, and of course you can financially support the channel, of course. But yeah, all of that said, I'll be back with another video soon, and thank you to Sebastien Meunier for all the amazing work he's done at Ann Demeulemeester.